two-time MotoGP world champion and MotoGP legend, Casey Stoner, who's back in the paddock, and he's kindly given up some of his time to have a chat with us and members of the media. Casey, first of all, I'll ask a few questions before handing over to the media. Welcome back. It's great to see you here after a few years not being in the paddock. So tell us what brings you here and how long has it been since you were last in the paddock?
Yeah, well, it's been, that's strange. Yeah, well, it's been 3.5 years, I believe. It was Mugello 2018, the last time I was in the paddock. So it's been far too long. You know, this was my whole world, I suppose, for a lot of years. We knew everyone, we knew everything. And a lot of people, you know, in this paddock are family and friends. So it's been far too long and you know, we've missed everyone, to be honest. So yeah, it's been fantastic. We tried to come over last year, but of course we had plans, and then of course COVID hit. But it was fantastic that MotoGP was able to run at all. And then this year, of course, everybody learned how to get through the situation a bit better, and Australia just recently opened up. So we thought we'd come over and try and, you know, talk to some people one-on-one and make some connections again that we've you know, I suppose lost over the last few years.
Casey, in the time that you've not been here, we know that you're still an avid fan of the sport, of course. We've just recently crowned a new 2021 MotoGP world champion in Fabio Quartararo. What have you made of the 2021 season?
It's been incredibly interesting. You know, it's in terms of, you know, diversity of brands on the podium and riders and everything. It's kind of you know, day by day, weekend by weekend, it's plucking the podium, you know, out of a hat. There's no form guide. I suppose over the last 2 years, but especially this year, when people that you're expecting to be at the front, all of a sudden they're struggling, and then other people you really didn't expect to be there would go off and disappear and win a race. So it was very difficult and almost a little confusing to watch it this year, just to see some of the results that were happening, and like I said, it was very unexpected. So, in terms of you know, watching it, it was fantastic. I'd personally like to see a little more consistency from some riders, but at the same time, I guess the current format gives some riders that generally maybe wouldn't be at the front some confidence over certain weekends to then go and achieve something that, you know, in the past wouldn't be possible.
Casey, I just want to talk about Ducati, of course. It's 14 years now since you won the championship with them, and they're still without a rider champion since you. It must have been quite nice to see Christian Gabbirini working with Pecco this year. Do you feel like they're on the brink of taking that world championship again?
I think so. I mean, they've always been on the brink. For a long time now, they've been close to having, you know, the complete package and getting the job done, but unfortunately, you know, it's again which Ducati rider is going to be fast on which weekend. We need to see a little bit more consistency. Maybe a bike that, you know, is going to suit all the tracks. We've always had that issue. All the manufacturers have good tracks and bad tracks, but yeah, certain styles and certain circuits the Ducati does seem to struggle with. So they just need to create a little bit more consistency and a little bit, let's say, easier package at certain times. But they've always been very, very close, and I think, you know, if everything sort of swings their way, yes, they can win a championship. But when you've got Yamaha that's producing a great package year after year, and I mean, what a year Yamaha's had, you know, across a lot of different, you know, forms of motorsport this year. So they've really, you know, they're constantly putting out a package that's very, very difficult to beat. You got Marquez that when, you know, he's fit and healthy on the Honda, you know, they're very difficult to beat. So, you know, it makes it tough for them. It's not just throw some bikes out on track with a pilot on it, it's going to do the job. You know, you need that whole package to work together, and that can sometimes be difficult.
Casey, it's hard to believe that next year it'll be 10 years since you retired from the sport. You've always been so content with the decision that you made, but there must be occasionally these little fidgety moments when you're watching racing where you think, oh, I'd quite like to be there at this point. Do you still have those? If so, what are they?
The only times I'd have it is probably around qualifying. I quite honestly didn't ever enjoy race day that much. Sometimes it was nice and easy and everything went well, but it was so, you know, when you're on the edge of these things, it's so easy to make those mistakes. So I constantly had that. Unfortunately, it was just part of my personality that I didn't want to make mistakes. It's not that I just wanted to go out there and ride, you know, comfortably and naturally. It was like, I don't want to mess up, because You know, I've got a whole team of people that, you know, are expecting something out of me. So I learned to deal with that better in my later years and didn't have to worry about that as much. But I don't really get the wish or want to race again. But I did enjoy practice and qualifying, especially on the weekends. Certainly not testing, but practice and qualifying was always fun when everything would come together and then you just got to go as hard and as fast as you possibly could for a lap or two. When you got everything right, I got way more, you know, of a thrill out of that than I ever did winning a race, because in the races, you never went as hard as you could. You always had to manage tyres, fuel. You're always managing the situation, and you look like a fool if you go and try and go as hard as you can and crash. So there was always an element of holding back, whereas qualifying, a lot of the time you got to let loose, and you know, that was a lot of fun.
Casey, last question from me before I pass over to members of the media. Of course, your battles in your MotoGP career, a lot of them were with Valentino Rossi, who retires next year. Some of them, when you look back, just titanic clashes that are going to be talked about for decades. Do you look back on that rivalry with Valentino with sort of elements of fondness now? What are your thoughts on Valentino? Because it must be hard to believe that he's still racing in this time that you've been retired.
Yeah, but at the same time, you know, each to their own. If Valentino was still loving his racing, then, you know, there's no reason not to race. I myself wouldn't be able to do it because, you know, for me, racing was winning. You know, I still accepted the fact that, you know, I couldn't win sometimes. But at the same time, the reason I got up in the morning to go racing was to win. And so I really, you know, would struggle to not be running, you know, competitively at the front. And I've missed Valentino at the front. I think the last, you know, 2-3 years, I would have loved to have seen him battling it out with the guys. You know, I think racing could have been, you know, incredible with that, like he was in the season before. But, you know, we've had some amazing battles. We had a fantastic rivalry. You know, some good points, some bad points. You know, some things went my way, other things really didn't. But there was one thing that you know, was fantastic about racing Valentino, was that I got to learn from him. Whether it was on track or off the track with his media, he was always very savvy and very clever and very cunning. So I got to learn a heck of a lot, and I think also my achievements in my career were validated all the more having raced against him in his era. So, you know, I really appreciate the rivalries that I had through my career, that's for sure.
Thank you very much, Casey. I'm going to pass over to some questions now from members of the media, and we're starting off with Simon.
Hi, Casey. Simon Patterson from The Race. Since you left, there's been a lot of changes, equipment, rules, format. Which do you think has made sort of the biggest impact on how the sport has grown since your era? And then secondly, kind of picking up on what Steve said, do you find yourself sitting on the sofa kind of measuring yourself against the other guys, thinking, if I was in that fight, if I was in this race, I would do this, I would do that?
I wouldn't say I would be there comparing, you know, what I would do in that way. But maybe my opinion of how I would handle things differently, or different line, or set the bike up, or choose a different tyre, things like that. Because it's really impossible to be a lounge chair racer and sit on the couch and go, they shouldn't have done that. I mean, it's bloody hard work riding these things without, you know, 20 other bikes on the grid, all wanting to do the same thing and get the same piece of track. So it's not an easy job. And so I find, you know, some people have a little bit too much opinion because they're not there, they're not on it. No matter how in control you are, it's bloody difficult. And some people are, you know, at their absolute maximum capacity, just to sort of be there. So I always give a lot of respect to all the riders out there, whether they make good decisions or bad decisions or whatever. You always have to make it for yourself personally. As for technically why it's, you know, getting a bit closer, I would say the electronics are probably morphing into each other, I suppose, and giving a more sort of even playing field throughout the bikes. So you're not finding some people each weekend able to let's say, look after tyres better or find more grip and all this sort of stuff. You'll see a lot of the bikes all come out of the corner now and kind of look very similar with the way that they apply the power and the way that they can ride. So it's really difficult again until I ride the bikes with the current package on. I can't really comment from the outside. And a lot of these younger guys can't really comment from when I was riding either, and I can't comment from 10 years before me. So it's really impossible to just sit on the lounge and think what's happening and how they handle.
Matteo Aglio from GP1 e La Stampa. Ciao Casey. I would like to know your opinion about the Marc Marquez situation, because he had a lot of injuries, the last one in training with a head concussion. How much all these injuries can affect the head of a rider?
Injuries definitely affect you. It's part of racing. But something that I felt I was particularly good at, and I think that it's something Mark's very good at, is putting those things to the back of your mind, especially if you know the mistake you made. We all make mistakes, we all push too hard, we have crashes, things like that. It's just part of racing. Session, unless you to try and get the best out of it, especially if you know the mistake you made. We all make mistakes, we all push too hard, we have crashes, things like that. It's just part of racing. You have to try and get the best out of yourself and the bike. But I think it's learning from those and not continually making them. That's the biggest thing. So for me, whenever I had a crash in a session, unless I was really injured, there was nothing really stopping me from going back out on another bike, as long as it's close enough in setup. And even going faster, because it's like, right, I know where I went wrong there, a little mistake that I made. You either just knock it off a little bit through that section of track again. But so I never really got scared of, I was sort of always very cautious of crashing. I never wanted to crash. But I never got scared of mistakes that I made. So I would say for Mark, it's a little bit different situation. He's come through a very big injury with a very long recovery with a lot of complications. That's going to take its toll. That will take a little bit of time for you to get over mentally and physically as well. As much as people probably don't think physically it takes that long to come back, it's incredibly long. Even when I had my ankle surgery and I wasn't allowed to walk for a couple of months, few months, my thigh disappeared, like there was just no muscle. It just disappears so quickly when not in use. So his arm and shoulder and everything would take so much time to try and build up that years of training again, and there's also no way to replicate riding a MotoGP bike. As much as you can train doing all sorts of other things and get on a superbike, they do not even remotely close replicate what you go through on a MotoGP bike. So because he's not able to go and test and train on that, you're not building all those muscles again, so it's just going to take time. And then of course there's the fear of that kind of injury happening again. So it's impossible to know what Mark's going through, but the last year and a bit has been certainly tough for him.
Hi, Niki Kovacs from Nemzeti Sport Online Motor Review Hungary. Did you have the chance already to talk with Valentino? Did you have a chat? And what, let's say, surprised you the most, that he's going to retire, or having a baby girl that you have too?
Yeah, I haven't caught up with Valentino yet this weekend, although it's kind of perfect with the COVID situation. There's not many fans in the paddock, so it's a little more relaxed, and it's been fantastic catching up with everyone, to be honest. I don't think I was surprised that he retired. I was probably surprised that he's retiring this year. I thought he'd want to go out on a better note, but at the same time, it's the whole COVID situation's caused a lot of issues, and after racing for that many years, it's hard to know when is the right time. But I suppose with the news of his baby girl, I don't think that surprised me either. I mean, he always seemed like the type that would probably have kids as well. And, I suppose at the end of the career, it was all kind of, I was very unsurprised when I saw the news, that's for sure. I had a strange feeling actually a couple of weeks before, and I had a thought just by a couple of posts I'd seen and different things like that. I had a bit of a thought and told my wife, and then 2 weeks later the announcement was. So Yeah, but very, very happy for him. It's the next chapter in his life, and something which I'm sure he'll enjoy.
Hey Casey, Jack Fairman from Fast Bikes magazine in the UK. As your kids and family are growing up, you've obviously passed on a lot to them as a father. Have you got any desire whatsoever possibly to come back and have more of a role in the paddock, possibly as a mentor for younger talent?
Funny you should say that. It's something I've wanted to do since I finished my career. But it's not as easy as it sounds. You know, I've got a family that's in Australia. If I'd have to travel and all that sort of thing, I have to be away for them for a lot of time. So it's quite a interesting situation, because as much as I want to do that, at the same time, I'm not going to do it in half measures. You know, I'd want to do it properly and try and help someone through. So it's it's kind of a situation that I've had, you know, lots of discussions with my wife and with other people, and it's something I'd really like to do and enjoy doing. I feel that I've still got a lot to give. I've got very unique insight, I suppose. I know what it takes to be fast, but I also know how and why things happen. If I was given that information when I was, you know, earlier in my career, it would have saved me a lot of time learning it later on. So, you know, I'd really love to do that, but it's just, you know, making that situation's tricky.
Hola Casey, Manuel Pesino for Motosprint Italy and Riding Sport Japan. I have found interesting what you said about you enjoying really the qualifying, right? Therefore, I imagine you enjoy seeing a rider like Jorge Martin, such an explosive rider, in one lap. And my second question is about, of all these young guys that are arriving in MotoGP, Moto2, which one do you look as interesting?
In Moto3 and Moto2?
Yeah, Moto2, Moto3, the young guys, the new guys.
I mean, yeah, I respect someone who can pull out a lap, but for me, you know, one of my toughest competitors that I always had a heck of a lot of respect for was Jorge, who could churn out lap after lap after lap. That was always... See, as much as I used to enjoy myself having to pull a lap out and being able to push everything you can out of a bike, I also enjoy watching dominance. As much as people don't, they love to see racing and all the rest of it. If somebody goes out and dominance is clearly better than the rest, for me, I got a lot more respect for that. I like seeing that a lot more than someone who can just pull a lap time out and then in the race be a little inconsistent. So I want to see someone who can go out and week in, week out, session, whether it's qualifying or practice, they're always there and always churning out laps. I really like to see that. As for Moto2 and Moto3, there's quite a lot of talent coming through for sure. I mean, nobody can ignore Pedro Costa. It's just incredible what he's done this year. Those first 4 races were just unbelievable. It was really, really impressive to see someone with his maturity at his age. Has been, you know, fantastic to watch, but then Garcia's been good as well. I was trying to understand what was happening with his injury from Austin, but it can't be a good situation. You know, there's you know, of course, several that I haven't mentioned, and at the same time, just because you're quick in Moto3 doesn't mean, you know, you're gonna go through to the next categories. I myself struggled more in the lower categories than what I did in the MotoGP. There's Fernandez, Remy's done a fantastic job as well this year. They've both been great. And Bezzecchi, I think he has something, maybe even a little bit extra. I haven't seen it this year enough, but last year I saw something in him that maybe I haven't seen in other riders, some lines and things he was able to do that I certainly haven't seen anybody in those categories able to do. So I'd like to see what he can do in the future and in MotoGP and things like that. So with a bigger bike and a bit more power. But again, it's very difficult to predict the future and who's going to be good and bad. You see a lot of young talent, but then as they get up the categories, they struggle with different areas. So you know, it's a very tough world and there's a lot of competition.
Giovanni Zamagni, Moto.it from Italy. Ciao Casey. In the last year, it seems very difficult for riders to switch from a bike to another bike. For example, for Lorenzo, now Dovizioso, many riders. Why, in your opinion? Because you switched in MotoGP from Honda to Ducati and to Honda again and immediately won.
For me, again, I'm not inside that person or their mind or anything like that. Everybody has their way and their system of getting to grips with things. Lots of people like to do lots of laps and get their feeling, and they want this feeling to sort of come to them. For me, I never wanted that. It's like I knew until the last kind of half a second, I knew how to go that quickly on almost any bike. It's like I know if I brake there, get it to that point, I can do everything with relative ease. Let's say maybe the last second, maybe not half a second. You can sort of get it to that point quite easily. And then it's just the fine-tuning and trying to understand what you need to change in yourself. And I think the biggest thing that I did that maybe others don't is I'm more happy to adapt. There's lots of riders out there that go that the bike doesn't suit me, doesn't suit my style, doesn't do what I want. And it's like, well, either you get it to do what you want or you do what it wants. There's always positives in every bike out there. They all ride differently. They all have strengths and weaknesses. It's all about compromise on your setup. It's compromise on how you want the bike versus how it wants to be ridden. There's all kinds of things. So there's a lot of elements to it that makes it difficult to adapt to. But for me, the biggest thing was I didn't have pride in the fact that I want everything to work for me. I was always willing to work with the bike and try and figure out what it wants. And you know, my engineer was very, very good. I was always very happy with Christian. It was good to work with like that.
Hi, Casey. Michel Turcot, Motor Revue, France. If you could take one of the MotoGP bike of the grid for a few laps, just for fun, which one will you pick up?
I'd probably have to say the Yamaha, just because you know it was my biggest competition through all my career. It doesn't matter what bike I rode. It was always the you know most difficult one to beat. So it would just be interesting to know more what I saw from racing with it versus how it actually felt, the feel versus real kind of thing. So yeah, I suppose the Yamaha would be the most interesting for me, just to get an understanding of if it was possible to ride it differently than how my competitors rode it, or if you had to ride it as they did. So it would be very interesting.
Hi, Casey. This is Frank Weying from Eurosport Netherlands. Hi there.
How you doing?
I have two questions. First of all, it's been 10 years since you won your World Championship with Honda. Mm-hmm. After you left, it seemed like Honda was more or less focusing on Marc, and it seemed that they paid the price for that in the last couple of years. How do you look upon that? How do you watch what happened last year? And also, you said about the technical regulations. The regulations as they are now, would they fit you? Would you be happy with the way that they are now, or would you prefer more diversity?
With Marc, everybody knows he's incredibly talented. He had reaction timings that you know I think were second to none. That's why he was always able to lose the front, catch it so quickly. But I think one mistake that Marc and his crew sort of made in the early years was just, you know, he was always very strong in the brakes, so they were just turning that bike into a bike that was only good on the brakes. So it's that whole compromise thing that I was talking about. If you've got a massive strength on your bike, then you're making it extremely weak in other areas. You can't have everything. It's just what it is. You cannot have everything at once. That's why we've got so many different manufacturers winning, you know, week by week, because nobody's got the perfect package. So I think they were very heavily emphasized when I was testing with Honda. It was very heavily emphasized on braking and stability on the brakes, but then it did not like going through the corners. So I think they were very heavily emphasized when I was testing with Honda. It was very heavily emphasized on braking and stability on the brakes, but then it did not like going through the corners. Marc was very good at, let's say, covering some of the problems, and he's very good. You know, he used his late breaks and battling with people to make the thing work. But then also it's maybe what, you know, I think they had some issues in 2015, I think, or 16 when he didn't win the championship. You know, they had to go back to almost 2 years before chassis just to get some feeling back again, to get confidence that you could actually turn the bike more in the middle of the corner. So I cannot, again, sit on the lounge and say what's been happening lately. But I also know that even when I was in Ducati in the early years, you know, I was very much one of the only ones at the front and the others struggling further back. So, and I didn't ever find the bike that bad. You know, we were still able to win with it, still out of the podium with it. Each rider is different. What they want from it is different. So whether it's Honda's issue or what it is, it's very difficult to say. Because, like I said, I can't sit on the couch and just judge exactly what's happening. I can only go from my previous, you know, I suppose, issues with some of the chassis that I tested with Honda. So it's, you know, we know how talented Mark is, but, you know, Pole's starting to get there a little bit more now with the Honda. It's taken him a little while, but he's starting to, you know, get further towards the front. So maybe he's found what he needs out of it.
Mm-hmm. And the question about the technical regulations as they are now, is that what you would have preferred in your days?
Certainly not.
Probably not. No.
I'd love to have a say in the technical regulations, to be honest. You know, there'd obviously be controversy, but I believe there's elements there that don't need to be. There's certainly not safety issue. They're only pushing the price of development and everything through the roof. And yet we're still trying to make things more cost effective, yet one of the elements that we've got now, we've basically turned it into Formula One and the costs are just going through the roof. So I would like to see certain parts gone. Electronically as well, I think there needs to be a big reduction. I think it was back in 2015 or something when they brought in the equal ECU. It was still better than it was the year before already. So it wasn't a step backwards like everyone thought it was going to be. And I think we honestly need a step backwards. I want to see them sliding. I want to see the mistakes. I want to see people struggling for grip and sliding out of corners. People maybe starting the race really well, but then with their tyre selection, you know, maybe dropping back, and people that were starting slower coming forward. That will all happen with you know, with a few different regulations. It wouldn't take much. And I think the overtaking would actually get better than what it is now, because it wouldn't only be under brakes, someone having to send it up the inside because they all come out of the corner kind of the same. You know, you'd find someone that would mess up the exit a little bit and someone would get the run on it. Bike setup would then be a lot more critical as well. I think there'd be a lot of elements to a few things to change would you know, make for some incredible racing.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Hi, Casey. Imre Pavlovic from Motorsport Aktuell and Motorrad from Germany. I have two questions. One is, I have heard some 2 years ago that you had some health issues. I would like to know if how you are at the moment. And the second is, we haven't heard from you since quite a long time. So how do you spend your time in Australia?
To be honest, since I finished my testing role with Ducati, I got my shoulder reconstruction, which was fantastic. I've struggled massively with my health. I got to the point where I couldn't get off the couch for basically 5 months. You know, from bed to the couch was my exercise for the day. I couldn't explain anything. We couldn't understand anything, but I just wasn't able to. Mentally, I was struggling, physically, massively. And so the last sort of 3, almost 4 years now, I've just been trying to manage the situation, trying to learn how to conserve energy through the day, learning what hurts me long term versus what not necessarily makes me better, but it just reduces the effect of my issue. People and went backwards again. So I'm a little less optimistic with things at the moment. I just kind of go day by day how I feel. Sometimes I'm extremely exhausted and just cannot explain it. and then other days feel a little better, but I'm basically never more than 60% of my usual self. I've had to learn to walk everywhere, which I hate. I always used to jog just about everywhere, but now I have to walk, and it's just all about conserving energy and getting through each day.
Hi, Casey. Casey, a marvellous career. Casey, you mentioned there about that competitive environment and that sort of almost lion sort of mentality to strive for perfection. At the height of your game, did you feel the stroll and the demands of it mentally as well was taking its toll on you and your family life after years and years of dominance? Did you feel that you needed to get away from the sports as well?
I felt that I needed to get away from the sport when I retired, for sure. I think if I did one more year of racing, I probably wouldn't have touched a motorcycle for 10 years. You know, I was that over it. It had become such a job that I wasn't enjoying, and I didn't want to not enjoy bikes. I wanted to enjoy them. So, you know, I definitely don't regret any decision I made like that. But no, I don't think in terms of, you know, mentally, it must have affected me. I wouldn't have said so, but, you know, there's no doubt it's, like I said, the biggest part of the job was media and appearances and all this sort of other thing, and training through injuries, and just, it was just a constant slog. Very rarely got to go home. So there was all kinds of elements that made it tough for me over the years. And, you know, which sort of took the enjoyment out of it, I suppose. But, no, there's been no regrets. It's just, you know, whether it was a mental toll after so many years, it's really difficult, almost impossible to say. You know, maybe later in my life I'll have more insight and kind of look back in my career from a different perspective and understand it a bit better.
And finally, for me, Casey, do you miss those rivalries to even today?
I miss kind of any rivalry because for the last 4 years, you know, my competition has been me, trying to just do anything for the day and trying to learn how to manage my energy levels. So I haven't been able to be competitive at anything, and it's still something that I enjoyed, whether it wasn't a MotoGP anymore, but even, you know, I was starting to do quite a lot of mountain biking. I got to a fairly good level where, you know, I was about to start racing and everything, you know, not to be extremely competitive and serious, but I wanted to see where it led. You know, it was something enjoyable I was having a ball with. But unfortunately, yeah, things just became more and more difficult.
Hello, Casey. Diogo from Motorcycle Sports. A question about the evaluation of the bikes and the mentality of the young riders. How do you see? Do you see that the bikes of today has reached a limit of speed and technology? And do you think that it has to be some bigger support for the young riders so the safety issues can be on the top of their mind?
Are you talking with the young riders, the Moto3?
Yes.
Yep. Difficult subject with the young riders. I think the support needs to come from more race direction. I think there needs to be a little bit more either clarity or definitive decisions on riding and things like that, because there's been no issues for so many years, and then now that there's all this leeway, there's the edge of the track. There's no edge of the track anymore. It just keeps going, and it's limited by, you know, some green paint. I think it doesn't help the situation. People have no fear anymore because there's no edge of the track. Whereas before, when there was green grass, everybody was kind of having to check themselves. Whereas now it's like, hey, I'll bust him and it doesn't matter. He'll run off the track, but there's plenty of track there. So I think everyone needs to learn to have a little more respect for each other. I don't think it's just the young guys causing it. I think, you know, I've seen a lot of more mature and more experienced racers still doing similar things. I think it all stems from the penalties and punishments maybe not being harsh enough and not being definitive and clear enough. So, if there's a lot more of that, then everybody's going to, you know, be a little bit more reserved. But for me, the worst thing that's happened to motorcycle racing is all that extra runoff. There's just no edge of the track now. There's no limit, and you know, I think that's very hard to contain everybody inside.
Morrison here. I have a question just about your opinion on the state of Australian racing at the moment. Obviously, Jack is top 5 in the MotoGP Championship. Remy could win the Moto2 Championship this weekend. We have Joel Kelso coming through to Moto3 next year. What are your opinions on these riders and how Australian racing is shaping up?
Yeah, both Aussies that are currently in MotoGP, or MotoGP and Moto2, they've actually impressed me in the way that they've really worked on themselves and their racing really well. You know, there's no doubt at times in their career they were struggling in the last years, but they've really worked hard on themselves and let's say worked on their weaknesses and turned, you know, as many strengths as they can, and now they're a serious kind of threat in both championships. So it's actually been really impressive, because one of the hardest things to do is to change yourself and the way you look at things and the way you go about everything. Instead of just having your natural instincts take over, clearly they're being, you know, very thoughtful with their racing and their setup and moving forward. So it's been really nice to see. It's been nice to have a couple of Aussies at the front again. It's been quite a long time, unfortunately, but you know, we've looked forward to this, and you know, Australia without a doubt is enjoying it.
Let's try again. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Perfect. Thank you. Sorry about that.
You're good.
Coming from Sport 5 Israel. Nice to see you, Casey. You've been very complimentary about Valentino, and he has been very complimentary about you. But when we think about Valentino and you, we cannot ignore that incident with Ambition. And I wanted to know, looking back at it now, how do you feel about what happened that day and what you said, and how it's still here since then? And I wanted to know, your girls, they seem very competitive, both are riding bikes at home. I wanted to know if there's a future there and if you're supporting it. Thank you.
No, the incident in Jerez with Valentino, I mean, I'd probably handle it the same now as I did then. You know, as you know, we had a big rivalry for many years before that, and it had all got, you know, prickly and all those sort of things. But, you know, I think at the end of that day, I'd already forgotten about that. You know, I was thinking about my championship. And quite honestly, we were pretty sure Valentino wasn't going to be a part of that championship that year. So, you know, we had other things to worry about. We had, in particular, Jorge to worry about, who'd just come off a championship, is extremely consistent. So, yeah, I don't think I'd handle it any different, you know, because we'd be in the same situation. We still would have been, you know, extremely heavy rivals. And it was a fantastic rivalry, whether good or bad. Like I said, I learnt a lot off him, and I'm sure he did off me as well. But, you know, it was fun at the same time, you know, difficult, because, you know, later on in my years in MotoGP, especially the last two, you know, I learnt how to deal with everything a lot better on and off track, and it made it, you know, more enjoyable for me. But, you know, you can't have racing without rivalries. It never got to a really bad, dirty point. It was just always, you know, little snide comments here and there. So yeah, it was enjoyable, but with time comes perspective as well. And it wasn't long after I finished my career that there was very little to no, you know, any resentment or anything like that towards Valentino. I've always had huge amount of respect. You can't race at the top with these guys and not have respect for them and what they do and what they've achieved. There's no doubting that. So, yeah, to be honest, there's been nothing between us for many, many years, but, you know, certainly enjoyed our rivalry. We had some fantastic races, some difficult ones, but you know, we always learn from those.
And the question about you girls.
For the girls as well. No, I don't think they're super competitive yet. They both enjoy riding their bikes around, especially, you know, COVID. We had quite a lot of time together at home and things like that. So some days they want to ride, sometimes they don't. I don't really want them to race bikes. It's a hard career, it's a hard life, and it's hard on your body. But at the same time, if they want to, I'm not going to stop them. So I just want them to learn from me rather than some boyfriend later in life when that maybe knows a little less than myself. I'd rather them learn from me and know what they're doing on a bike. So, you know, if I had a choice for them to do a sport, I'd prefer golf or something like that. It's a little longer career and a little less damaging on the body. But yeah, no, they enjoyed life. It's been great. We've been really fortunate with COVID. You know, Australia has been locked down, but our area has been very fortunate, and we have some acres to spend some time in. So we can understand how difficult it was for so many families, but we've been very fortunate where we were. So we had a good time with them.
Casey, that concludes the press conference. It's fantastic to see you. Thank you so much for sparing some time, and have a great weekend. We'll hope to see you soon.
Thank you very much.